YouTube and welcome to Black Cinema Central, where we talk about classic black movies and why they're dope. I'm Naomi Williams, and today, I just kicked the stand. Today, we have another showdown. Yes. Do the Right Thing versus School Daze. Why Do the Right Thing is School Daze? Why not School Daze and Higher Learning? First of all, this is my channel, so sit down. I'm joking. I wanted to compare these two because they're both about communities and the tensions that exist within each. One community is Brooklyn, and the other community is an HBCU campus. For those of y'all who don't know, historically black college/university. I personally believe this versus battle goes to Do the Right Thing. Yes, but before we talk about why I prefer Do the Right Thing, let's get into School Daze. At historically black Mission College, the activist-minded DAP, played by Laurence Fishbourne, immerses himself in the world of political rhetoric and social movements. One day, he hopes to rally the students as a united front. At the other end of the spectrum, Julian, played by Giancarlo Esposito, pause, y'all. I love Giancarlo Esposito. That man has not had a job since the fucking 80s. He's literally in everything. Oh my gosh. Let's return. At the other end of the spectrum, Julian, played by Giancarlo Esposito, the head of the biggest frat on campus, is more concerned with maintaining a strict social order. In between, DAP's conflicted cousin, Half Pint, played by Spike Lee, spends most of his time rushing the frat. Rushing the frat basically means doing what you gotta do to get into the frat. School Daze is dope because one, its black Broadway vibes are everything. It's identified as a musical, but I don't know if I would call it a musical. I feel like it's a movie with musical elements. There's only one number where there are two groups of characters singing to and with each other, which is Good or Bad Hair. Vocals, I know, right? Good or Bad Hair is iconic. First of all, the sets. Fire. And then two, the conversations about colorism are real. I saw this movie for the first time when I was in elementary school, and even then, I fully understood the dark-skinned naturalista versus the light-skinned girl that gets a perm or has a nice weave all the time. And that dynamic, little girls literally start seeing as early as elementary school. To see that and to see adults also contemplating and dealing with it is super real. It definitely focuses on colorism amongst women. I think it would have been super interesting for the movie to touch more on colorism amongst men. Because when you talk about dark skin versus light skin, oftentimes what is dark skin is more masculine, which can work against the woman, but work for the man, which is an interesting dynamic to be in, but that shit goes back to slavery, so not surprised. Number three, the conversations about socioeconomic status are also very real. Even though we're not dealing with a predominantly white institution, we're still dealing with socioeconomic status in this college environment. So students versus people in the town, that's a very real thing. Any school, any college, 9 times out of 10 is operating within or adjacent to a hood, a low-income community of color, which is a very weird dynamic because there's an exclusive essence to a college. Usually there's some type of security. They make assumptions about who's who, and that can be very alienating to someone who has always lived in that community. That creates friction, and that shit is real. When it came to DAP and DAP's friends, there was a point in time where he got in trouble for protesting and, they started threatening his education. And one of his friends was like, I'm a first generation student. Like, I'm the first one in my family to be in the runnings to get a 4-year degree. I don't know if I want to put that in jeopardy for a protest. And then we start talking about what are you willing to sacrifice in order to attain security? How do you stand up for yourself and what you believe in an environment where you have to follow a specific code in order to get to the finish line? It's always this negotiating your identities and yeah, all that shit. Real shit. And then 4, exploring the woke black person trope through the eyes and experience of a college student. This is also very real and something that I appreciate more as having been to college, where you have 2 types of woke college student. There's the woke college student who fully believes in everything that they're saying and is willing to sacrifice some elements of their education or some of their privileges at that school in order to stand up for what they believe in. And then you have the woke students of color who are simply protesting for the clout. They protest to a certain extent, you know, they go to a certain point and then they back off. And then they go to a certain point and then they back off. So I fully believe that Dap believed in everything that he was saying, but there's a moment in which Rachel, his girlfriend, asks if he's dating her because he really likes her or if it's because she's one of the darkest girls on campus and that could add to his little woke black man image. I don't believe that was his intent, and I think that character also knew that wasn't his intent. She just kind of wanted to get under his skin because she was pissed off. Oftentimes that trope, that character is mocked and made into a parody. So to see it taken seriously in this movie was really dope, and I really enjoyed it. How did y'all feel about School Daze? How did you feel about the musical numbers? Was it too theatrical for you? What do y'all think about School Daze? How did y'all feel about the characters? For those of y'all who went to HBCUs, are the dynamics that exist in that movie still relevant? Are there things that have changed within the social order of an HBCU that maybe they could incorporate in a new School Daze? I think wouldn't that be fire? I think that would be fire. Now to the movie I believe won this showdown. Do the Right Thing. Salvatore Salfragione, played by Danny Aiello, is the Italian owner of a pizzeria in Brooklyn. A neighborhood local, Bugging Out, played by Giancarlo Esposito, becomes upset when he sees that the pizzeria's wall of fame exhibits only Italian-American figures. Bugging Out believes a pizzeria in a black neighborhood should showcase black heroes, but Sal disagrees. The wall becomes a symbol of racism and hate to Bugging Out and to other people in the neighborhood, and tensions rise. I believe this movie is dope because 1, Brooklyn is Spike Lee's bread and butter. Okay, Spike Lee is a master at capturing the Brooklyn aesthetic and essence. In knowing what these nuances are, he is an expert at painting this portrait. Just like John Singleton was an expert at capturing the essence of LA. Those 2 directors are just examples of how important it is that we tell our own stories. With Spike Lee being from Brooklyn, he is just a master at creating a collage of images and sounds and experiences and dialogue that is just so authentic to the Brooklyn he knows and grew up in. 2, this movie captures the tensions that exist in urban environments. A collage of cultures, languages, and ideas that are constantly struggling to coexist. This is urban America and so many other communities that have diverse populations living on top of each other. And it becomes apparent that there's a social hierarchy that exists and no one wants to be at the bottom. And that has always been the reality of urban communities in this country. No one wants to be at the bottom. You have people who speak different languages, believe in different religions, different cultural values, and when the people around you don't believe in what you believe in, if you aren't open-minded, then you just start attacking everybody around you like you're a fucking white blood cell trying to kill the bacteria around you, and that is not the mindset to have. There's a plus and minus, you know, and we see that in Radio Raheem's little spiel about love and hate. And when you live in this super diverse environment, there's this love and hate dynamic. As soon as things start changing and people who are different from you are moving into your neighborhood, then you get this invasion type mentality. Oh, they're coming in and taking our jobs and moving into our homes. And there's a level of consistent displacement that happens in urban environment as well that is always unsettling, but it is the reality of that type of environment, especially in a capitalist society. Every now and then, in bouts of frustration, we see characters shitting on other communities, spitting out stereotypes because one character from another community pissed them off. And this is also the reality of how a lot of Americans process that frustration. They just start spitting out stereotypes. And that's not helping nobody. And I think about that scene where Radio Raheem is like talking mad shit to the little Korean couple that owns the little corner store. He coming at them crazy.
D, learn to speak English first, all right? D.
How many you say?
And then what? They're supposed to just respect you because you're disrespecting them? That's not how that shit goes. I think that sense of irony often exists in this country. That dynamic is super real, especially in an urban environment. And 3, this movie talks about gentrification, which is often illustrated as a type of invasion of a community, as I mentioned. A group of wealthy, often white people begin settling in your hood with no respect or regard to the people being displaced who have been there for far longer than them. So we have tension arising from class that also has racial undertones. Real shit. 4, this movie is a commentary on the use of violence to protect and reclaim. And I think this, to me, was the most powerful aspect of this movie. And we don't get slapped in the face with the principles of Dr. MLK Jr. and Malcolm X. But little by little, subtly, you understand the dialogue that exists between these two ideologies and these two people. Both Malcolm X and Dr. MLK Jr. are referenced because they were the epitome of this dialogue within the Black community. And this commentary is why I like Do the Right Thing a little more than School Daze. We live in a country that utilizes violence to maintain a specific order. So violence is clearly effective. I can't stand when people are like, oh, violence isn't the answer. Bitch, sometimes violence is the only thing that can be done instantly and effectively. But oftentimes when it comes to violence, depending on the emotional state of the situation, people can utilize violence and not be effective. And I think that speaks to exactly what happened at the end of this movie. Violence erupts and takes place. People die. And then it's like, spoiler alert, Sal's little pizzeria got burned down, but now what? Does that necessarily guarantee that a Black business is gonna move into that space? No. And then also at the end, you kind of see this moment of understanding between Spike Lee's character, Mookie, and Danny Aiello's character, Sal. Also the facilitation of peace. That's a powerful position to be in, to know and understand how to facilitate peace. And the mayor's character, for a little bit of time, was kind of like that character, the facilitation of peace. But it got to a point to where he couldn't facilitate anything. People was pissed, they were fighting, the police were there, it turned into fucking 1964. Niggas got sprayed with water hoses, dogs came out, it was a wrap. But this dialogue of like violence and when is violence effective, not necessarily when is violence right or when is it called for, but when is it effective? And Dr. MLK makes his argument, an eye for an eye makes the world blind. And then Malcolm X makes his argument, I'm about to protect myself and my family by any means, period. So that conversation is always kind of in the balance. And then when we're talking about that feeling of invasion, when do you then feel like you need to protect yourself and your community? When you feel like your community is being quote unquote invaded. Different types of people have felt that way in this country, but when it comes to Black people, that is like a consistent struggle to deal with. Unless you live in like a small Black community that's always been Black, and 9 times out of 10, that's a rural environment. So yeah, that last point is pretty much why I love Do the Right Thing more than School Daze. How did y'all feel about Do the Right Thing? Does Do the Right Thing fall into your top 5 Spike Lee joints? Is it a tie? Let me know in the comments below. I love Spike Lee joints. Some people think Spike Lee is overrated. I love him.